I'll ask you one or two questions that I've been thinking about. To the Swedish listeners particularly, or say the Northern European participants, what should they be expecting here now that the virus is sweeping over Europe and China is largely going back to normal? What should they expect in the short term, say 2 to 3 months?
I think in the short term we will see the effects still here. We still have a lot of, especially for the air freight, we still have a lot of problem for the supply. We still have a short supply of space for air freight to any markets. And this, before we are back with that, we need travel restrictions for people to be lifted. Until that is happening in a bigger scale, it will be very limited capacity for the air freight. The ocean freight, I would say we haven't really started the problem yet. I think that we have ahead of us looking forward. So I think we will have a long time with some uncertainty for the prices and uncertainty for the balance of the transportation. So communicate, try to work with forecasts, try to get forecasts from how much we need and communicate with everyone in the supply chain, factories to transportation companies.
And how should we expect logistics within Europe and within the US to be affected now that this new situation on the European and the US side is developing? Will there be delays at port in these locations or between port and the customer?
That's a good question. I actually think we have a lot of good people in here sitting in Europe and in USA who can give us on hands-on locations really good advices. But for sure, if we just see what happened in China, it was causing a lot of disturbances, a lot of delays. So I would absolutely guess we will see similar things happening overseas as well. I know we have a lot of people in here also in the supply chain in Europe and in USA with us. Anyone have any good advice how you see the market there moving? We can share experience.
So Anders has a question about train freight. Please, Anders, go ahead.
Oh, hi. Sorry, just a quick question, or maybe half question, half reflection. Obviously, the train freight capabilities between China and Europe has increased over the past few years. However, my impression is that many companies still are reluctant to switch or use the new capabilities. Is this accurate, do you think, Stefan? Or and if so, why do you think companies are so reluctant to utilize train freight rather than sea or air?
I think that from my point of view, I think that the train freight is a really good option, and it has really an absolute part in the package. I think we just have to be aware what that place is. If we look on what is if you're really looking for the lower cost for big items, it will always be lower cost to do that by ocean. It cannot compete with that. But of course, it is somewhere in the middle. It's basically, I would say, much faster than the ocean, but much cheaper than the air freight. And it works good today. I think what we saw problem in the beginning was it expanded very, very quickly. And we saw a lot of operators, what can we say, searching some luck and maybe not properly skilled or overselling how it was working or overselling the capacity or the transit time, which I think has been a lot of backlogs. But I would say today it works really good. But like everything else, there are some people out there who's really good with it, and there are some operators still has been overselling the capacity.
Thank you.
Let's see. Let's see. Here we go. What about so this is from Morier. What about the second wave of COVID-19 in China? When do you think it will happen? How best to anticipate that second slighter crisis? This one is about predicting the future. We have a little bit of insight from Hong Kong, I guess, where it wasn't anticipated how big the crisis would grow in Europe and the US. And now looking back, it seems obvious, but of course, once the crisis moved to a different part of the globe, people traveling from that part of the globe back to this part will be bringing it with them all over again. So unfortunately, this is what's going on now the last few days in Hong Kong, where we've had, I think, about 100% increase. So compared to where we were 2 weeks ago, the total number of cases have gone up 100% in just 2 weeks, which is worrying, and we don't really know where this is going to be heading. Certainly, this is something Chinese government are trying to keep their eyes on, but potentially this could also happen all over China. What China has done only yesterday, I believe, is an entry bar for all foreigners.
Yeah.
And they've actually nullified, if I understand correctly, they've nullified all visas. There might be some exceptions to people already in the country, but as of immediately, foreigners are not welcome to China.
I think the ones who is inside, you will remain, but you will not allow new entries, as I understand. I'm not an expert on that, but that's my understanding.
This is a good indication of how seriously Beijing takes the threat. Although, to be fair, the biggest threat in China will probably be movement of people within China, mainly then between Hubei province and the other parts. This is from Ilya. Hi, Ilya. Can you please share with us a scenario with one additional transportation method besides air freight coming under pressure? If rail or sea freight is affected, what can we anticipate?
Basically, I would say that the main transportation is, of course, you have land transport, and we have the rail, and we have the ocean, and we have the air. Then you have some combinations of sea air, but they, of course, facing the same problems. If we take for the sea air, which is a combination where we do sea to Middle East and air freight to Europe, that worked in the beginning until the passenger flights from Middle East were stopping. So it's all affected. You also can do land transport into Europe, of course not to USA, but there's also land transport by truck from Asia to Europe running as well. But as I said, for the moment, actually the rail has been quite robust, and also the ocean so far.
Any other questions? Here from Uwe. Hi, Uwe. The train shipments is around 20 days to Sweden, but up 70% higher price. That is the biggest reason we're careful about this kind of shipping.
Yeah, I would say if you look on the transit time, as per our experience, from where the train departure in China to when you reach a door in Sweden, I would say around 24 days. 20 days you will come to the train station, and then you will unload and bring it to door. So around 24 days to door. The pricing, yes, I would say maybe around, a little bit depending on the seasons. Some seasons more, some less, but in that region, so definitely higher than the ocean freight. It is. But of course much less than the air freight. Sometimes maybe 50%, sometimes 40%, a little bit depending on the season, because the rail has a tendency to be more stable during the year, while we see the ocean freight in the peak seasons can shift quite much in cost. Is that answer for the question?
I'd say you answered the question, yes. So we're getting a couple of questions about the presentation, and yes, we will be sending that out to everyone who partook today. Thank you, Uwe. From John, I'm finding that air freight has become extremely expensive. It's certainly true, and it was not cheap to begin with. When can we expect this to start normalizing?
As I said, the reason for the big increase in the cost is, of course, that we see that all the governments restricted travel of people, and a lot of our cargo is actually moving in the belly of the passenger flights. And that means we have grounded almost like 95% of the passenger flights globally. That means that those planes is not carrying any cargo, and we only left with the freighter planes to move the cargo, and that they are simply too little capacity to be able to handle even this reduced demand that we have now. So that's why the ones that is still traveling, the price, as you say, have absolutely skyrocketed. We see pricing, I would say, between 4 to 6 times normal pricing. So it's a major jump, and still then it's not sure that the transit time is absolutely stable anyway. So and this, I think it will improve. We see some more freighters coming back. We see some more passenger, so to speak, planes being converted into freighters, meaning that they fly the passenger flights only with barely cargo and some cargo in the passenger, but no passengers. So it's improving, but we will take time, and it will not be better until really the travel restrictions are getting lifted. That's firstly when we see the capacity coming back. Is that some guidance how we see it?
Well, we have an example here from Robert. I was quoted £28,000 to move 9 pallets from Taiwan to the UK. Well, let's hope that's gold he's moving. Then it would maybe make sense. But yes, that is certainly an outrageous.
It is. It sounds very much like, I can't really go into that, but for sure there. As I said, there's also some options coming. It's a little bit how long time. I would say the best thing again, communication. How long time can you allow for the movement? Sometimes if we have a little bit longer time, we can find some optional airports and some optional trucking. So I would say communicate specifically, is it a deadline? How long time can it take? And so on. Can it be divided? Or maybe if can take 20 days, maybe it could 25 days, could it be on the rail, or could it be part on the rail and part on the air? So share information of the specific requirements, and there could be some options to do something.
Robert can't wait for it to return to normal. Is that a feeling you share with him?
Yes. I mean, both. First of all, of course, personal. I would like to see this as a human being to disappear, but I'm not a doctor, but also professional. Of course, for all of us, I'm sure for all of us here and listening, working in our daily work, it's no easy days. But this, for sure, if we can do it also better than the other ones, there's also some opportunities, and it will demand a lot of communication, a lot of opening ears, a lot of finding solutions and options, because as we said before, it's not just the old options available anymore. We need to look for new options here and communicate how it can be.
I think that's a very valid point. To try and use this, this forced opportunity really to grow and to develop new ways of doing things. We have another question here. Do you know how long it takes to reorganize PX aircraft to freighter?
If you would convert them properly, it will take time. Yeah. What we see now is some just easy fixing. It basically means that they fly them without passenger, and they fill up the belly space in them, and then they put some cargo as well and take out some seats and so on. So it's not a proper conversion. That will take some longer time, but it's a quick make fix, and it works, of course, as long as the pricing is on this level, because you can't load as much in them as a proper freight.
From Ilya, are Chinese suppliers taking on some of the burden relative to logistics? Perhaps perhaps with help from Chinese government and resources at their disposal?
I think everyone is taking a hit in this. I don't think it's anyone who is coming up with a upper hand cost-wise on this. I think purchases will take a hit, factories take a hit, transporting companies take a hit. Everyone is a part of this at the moment, I think so, and everyone trying to push back and move around costs and still have the supply chain to move.
That's what we're seeing. This is a game for survival first and foremost. Who will still be standing, and what components of the supply chain will still be left standing when this whole crisis blows over? This is the game we see Chinese factories, the terms we see they thinking in. Prices will be changing, but the main objective here is really to stay alive.
Yeah, that's my feeling as well. Everyone is in here and to be able to come to the other side.
So any further questions?
Yeah, from Steve. Yeah.
I'll go ahead and read it. So Steve says he saw on LinkedIn that Austrian Airlines has done just what we were talking about, lining seats with plastic and putting large cartons on seats. Is this something we're seeing?
Yeah, that's basically what we see they have been doing now. Of course, it is happening. It's happening a little scale, but that's what they do. They take some passenger planes. They not proper freighters with wheel doors and so on. But that means you load up the belly that you have below the seats in the plane, and then you're using the passenger area to load cartons. And it works when the rates for the freight is very high and demand is very high, and the fuel cost is somewhat low. Then it works. But long term, of course, it's not a fix. The cost will still be, production cost will still be high.
We're going to start wrapping up here, I think. I see, so any last questions now would be the time. I see one here, and it's a good one. Can we expect it to get worse until it gets better? I think the clear answer to that is yes, on a global scale. China is now back to approaching normality, but the rest of the world is now heading the other direction. There's a lot of uncertainty in virtually all industries right now, what's going to happen in the US and in Europe and India.
Yeah.
No one really knows the answers to these questions, and everyone's kind of trying to lock down their operations to sail through and then to try and survive the best they can.
Yeah. I can only agree on that. I think we will have more uncertainty before we're coming out of the other side. I'm not again a doctor, but from a supply chain, as we said before, once it was only a China problem, it was quite straightforward to see China coming out on the other side. But now I think this just shows how global the supply chain is. It's spread in the system, and we have a lot of imbalances. I think this will not take a few weeks to fix. I think even if the situation gets good tomorrow, it will take quite a long time to untangle the supply chain. That's my feeling.
From Atkinson, from Lewis Atkinson, what is the current lead times to reserve space on vessels to the US and Northern Europe?
At the moment on the vessels, to get the space is okay, because as we said, as we see it now, the demand is still on the lower side, so get the space is okay. But I think if we're looking forward, I'm afraid we will see that lead time get longer. Now if we book like 12, 14 days, it's okay, but I think that will get longer because we expect production to come up, and we know there will be more vessels taken out from the carrier, from the service, in order to save money when the demand was low. So I think that lead time will get longer. I think we're soon up to 3 weeks to book in advance.
From Premisl Hanak, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, or almost correctly. European governments give support to companies in terms of tax breaks and so on. What does the Chinese government do? That's a good question where I don't necessarily have the answer. We're seeing some indications that they will be supporting with certain parts of payroll and social security payments.
Yeah.
So there will be some breaks for companies there. What are you seeing?
I can only see, I think it's different for the production industry. I think it's different. I'm sure there will be people here. I can only say what we see as a service sector and the transportation. For us, we see the government have made two things. First of all, they wanted to protect the jobs. They make it very hard to lay off people. That's the first thing. The second thing is they actually have supported. They have supported with some reductions in social welfare costs. So they have reduced some costs for labor. And a lot of the governments also have given pressure to landlords to reduce rents as well. So both of this we see social welfare costs and rents temporarily for 3-4 months. Hong Kong, the situation is a bit different. Hong Kong has a more of a hands-off approach and have not really, as I have not seen any really reductions from the government in terms of that.
Would rail be viable to ship to the UK?
Yes. Oh yeah. Rail works into all of Europe today. As I said, of course, it goes on the rail into Europe, usually to Germany or to Poland or to some of those main hubs, and then it will be on rubber wheels and trucks the rest of the part. Now, with that said, they are of course also coming now with the situation in Europe will have some effects on the land transport going out from the hubs.
And from Robert, what are the effects on smaller parcels? Does UPS and DHL have their own planes?
The small parcels are still running, and again, there's a combination. They have some own planes, and also part of it is in their own planes or own lease planes, and part of it is, of course, also in the passenger planes. So it's a combination. But the same thing there, of course, cargo is searching anywhere to move now. So everything is getting congested and getting increases in prices. Anything that can take it to move it on the air or all the planes.
From Ilya, have you heard of any statistics relative to the way the virus has affected the logistics industry, worker health and shortages?
I haven't heard anything for the health, but as I said, what we have seen is, of course, that it affects the labor force. What we saw first was, of course, people couldn't go to the work, the same thing. That happened. We see some people maybe didn't want to work in certain regions. We saw the quarantine and road closures that really took away a lot of the efficiency. So the capacity disappeared, even if people were working. And I think we see the same for vessels as well, about quarantine and so on. So they will, long term, I think they will have some effects as well.
I guess maybe on board an ocean liner is the safest place to be right now.
Container vessels, of course, the people on board. It's not like the old days when you went to the shore and you could leave the vessel and go to the city. That's not anymore. They stay maybe a day or something, and they shift containers, and they don't really leave the vessels actually.
I think we might have missed, I don't think we missed anything. We've tried not to, certainly. And I think we're reaching the end of questions here. Someone's suggesting beer o'clock, and I think that's an excellent call, actually.
That's great.
So we're going to wrap this up. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Stefan and Norman for giving us this space today.
Thank you very much.
Time.
Thank you.
We will be mailing the presentation up.